Welcome back, and today we are checking out another SCP video. Today it's going to be SCP-3001 Red Reality. This video was a commenter suggestion from several of you guys. Thank you very much for that. You guys have been telling me to check out Red Reality in relation to a lot of the reality bending shenanigans that go on in the SCP universe. So, as far as the title goes, Red Reality, not sure. Maybe it's a different alternate version of reality that is red. Don't know. Let's find out, guys.
SCP-3001 Red Reality. What does it mean to be truly alone? You can be alone in a room, in a building, on an island, or on the moon, or you can be alone in your own mind. But we all live in a world filled with people. SCP-3001, on the other hand, shows us an example of an individual that is truly and utterly alone, which is a unique case of science fiction, and yet it also manages to be surprisingly grounded in reality. SCP-3001 is not a happy story, but it's also an incomplete one, which leaves us with a sense of hope. The bulk of 3001 takes the form of transcribed logs, so I would suggest reading through it all yourself, but I'll try to strike a balance between summarizing and reading them. To put it simply, SCP-3001 is a non-dimension, accessible through the creation of a specific type of flawed wormhole. Basically,
A non-dimension. Okay. All right. Let's continue.
it is a space between dimensions that really shouldn't exist, but was discovered by the SCP Foundation accidentally. It is believed to extend infinitely in all directions, but possesses no matter of any kind. The non-dimension also has an extremely low Hume level, which is a degree of measurement used by the Foundation to measure the strength or amount of reality in a given area. In other words, our baseline reality has a given level of Hume that we're accustomed to, but certain factors, such as other dimensions or reality benders, can change that level of Hume as things become more or less real.
Okay, so far, the way that I'm picturing this in my head, I'm almost picturing it like a bubble. Okay, so imagine our universe, our reality, if you will, is a bubble. Everything contained within that bubble is our entire existence, our reality, our universe, whatever, our dimension. And then, of course, there's other realities, which are other bubbles that have their own soapy, watery skin, if you will, or membrane. So the way I'm picturing this is, let's say you have two bubbles, one with our standard reality in it and another one with a different reality in it. How I'm picturing this is that this non-dimension, if you will, is the space in between the bubbles. That's how my mind is kind of picturing this as he speaks. It's the non-reality is the space between the membranes of actual reality,
So to speak. What a very low Hume level means for 3001 is that matter that would be located inside the non-dimension decays at an extremely slow rate, and organisms could still function despite taking damage that would normally kill them, up to a certain point. The downside of this, however, is that Hume fields tend to even out, and so prolonged exposure to 3001 will cause an organism's Hume level to drop until they begin to disintegrate. 3001 was discovered in 2000, while Dr. Robert Scranton and his wife, Dr. Anna Lang.
Okay, so you are capable of passing through that membrane into this reality of nothingness, and you're capable of functioning in there However, eventually you will basically cease to exist as your Hume level begins to match that of the surrounding area, which is the universe of nothingness, if you will. So as your Hume level goes down, you begin to disintegrate into nothingness so that you can basically match your surrounding environment. Okay, all right.
We're working on a device that would stabilize reality by manipulating Hume levels. Unexpected seismic activity at the site damaged several experimental reality stabilizers, creating one of those specific wormholes, which proceeded to pull Robert into the non-dimension before closing. We are then presented with a large number of logs, transcribed from audio recordings made by Robert. For the first 8 days of Robert being inside 3001, he attempts to navigate the non-dimension to find a way out while going through periods of panic, confusion, and anger.
As you would, being sucked into an alternate reality of nothingness, yeah. My initial reaction would be panic and confusion, no doubt. One would assume that Robert, being a member of the Foundation and a person who's actively studying these types of phenomenon or reality alterations, that he might have expected something like this, and yet, yeah, you would still be overcome with, terror and confusion.
He eventually makes his way over to a control panel that had gone through the wormhole with him,
Okay.
although he doesn't realize at first that it is actively recording. He makes several recordings, presumably for his own benefit, as he states his name and date of birth, mentions his favorite color is blue, and his favorite song is Living on a Prayer.
I'm wondering if he's doing this, if he's recording this specific information in the event that he begins to forget who he is or where he's from or what he's doing there. So I'm assuming he's leaving these logs for himself as a reference for himself to who he is.
And that he loves his wife, Anna. Before long, he notices a flashing light on the control panel and realizes that the machine is working and recording. He panics and states his name again, asking if anyone can hear him, saying he doesn't know where he is. He's not sure at all how the machine is working, but he's pretty sure that no one can hear him. He also notes how hungry and thirsty he is, saying that he should have died of dehydration by now, an effect of the low Hume level, although it will take Robert some time to realize this. After fiddling with the machine some more, he locates the controls, causing the machine to speak, telling him he's been here for 2 weeks, 3 days, 7 hours, and 58 minutes.
Okay.
Another week goes by, with Robert realizing now that it doesn't seem like he'll die here due to hunger or thirst, and he wonders if by some miracle he'll find his way out of here. 5 weeks go by with Robert barely recording anything, but he comes back and says that he's been trying to learn about this place he's in, referring to it as his prison and his kingdom. He manages to maintain his professionalism, recording a log saying that he's going to document this place as an SCP to maybe help someone else in the future that gets stuck in here. A few days later, he records a log as if it were a standard SCP document about the non-dimension, but we can see the cracks in his mental state beginning to show. The only light source in the entire non-dimension is a small red light on the control panel, so he's been using that as a marker for his explorations. He also notes that he's felt an itch or a tingle across his head recently, but only if he concentrates on it. He next realizes that although he's thought he's been walking on flat ground this whole time, there really shouldn't be anything to walk on in this place, and now he notes that it's felt more like he's been swimming through something that's been applying pressure, like a thick black gel. He now realizes that by concentrating, he can actually move vertically as well as horizontally, again using the red light as his reference point, or as he calls it, Little Red. He understands a bit more about the location he's in now, knowing that it was caused by a problem with the reality stabilizer. He does some math, and apparently figures out how low the Hume level of this non-dimension is, but is not sure of the effects of that, as he's mostly worked with above average Hume levels. At this point, he really begins talking to the red light directly, as if it were a person. He seems to be speaking to it and imagines responses coming back from it, but this is pretty understandable given the situation.
Yeah, definitely understandable. It's kind of surprising he managed to keep his mental state intact for that long. I mean, people kind of start to fall apart pretty quickly when they're in complete isolation. And even by all definitions of complete isolation that we have, like, being in an isolation cell in prison or being trapped on a desert island or something like that, they still have references. They still have, the sun. If you're stuck on an island, you've got the sun, maybe trees, the ocean, fish. You still have things around you to anchor you to reality or keep your bearings about you, about your where you're at, your situation. Even if you're in prison and you can't see the sun, you're locked indoors, something like that, you still have a bed, walls, a ceiling, a door. There's still physical things around you to interact with. So being in a dimension where there's literally nothing to interact with except for his one control console, that's crazy. He, like he says, he can't even really tell what he's walking on. There shouldn't even be something for him to stand on. So it's kind of interesting. It's definitely a scary situation to be completely isolated like that in a dimension, mind you. At this point, I'm not even sure if anyone even knows it exists. So
Robert's scientific mind allows him to keep focus, however, as he continues to perform calculations to help him understand 3001.
And I think that's what is actually keeping him sane, is the fact that he went into all of this with at least somewhat of an idea of what he was doing, because before he went into this reality, he was already a researcher that was working with Hume levels and working on either finding ways to detect distortions in reality or finding ways to stabilize reality. So at the very least, his mind had these concepts in his head already, because I could only imagine that you would lose your sanity very quickly if you were just a random Joe Schmo off the streets that had no concept of any of this type of stuff. Yeah.
He learns that the reality stabilizer that sent him and the control panel here cranked up their Hume levels to a few times normal level, meaning that it will take longer for them to equalize with 3001 and disintegrate. By his calculations, he has about 3 years or so before he's gone, and he believes he'll have something figured out by then. The tingling feeling he's had is his Hume level starting to diffuse. Robert's next log reads, "Hey Red, I'm gonna have to go for a bit. I want to test something, and you can't come with me. I'm sorry. No, Red, I'm really, really sorry. I want you to come, I do, but if we're together, the diffusion will increase faster. We both need as much time as possible. I need to figure this place out more, and you need to make sure you keep all that info in your head. Red, come on. You'll be fine, Red. I know you will. You're tough. A lot tougher than me. It'll only be for a bit, Red, but I need to see if I can find a way to keep us alive a bit longer. Maybe even get us out of here. If I can contain enough field, I can maybe even get us out. No, I'm not sure, but I need to find out. Red, we're talking about possibly escaping, okay? Yeah, it's a gap. A gap should have an end, like the walls of a canyon, understand? I need to find a wall, and then I can. I'm sorry, Red.
Okay, so it's kind of like when I was describing it as bubbles. He's kind of describing it the same way, where he's in the gap in a canyon and he should be able to find the walls of the canyon. If there's a gap, there should be an edge to that gap. If there's, if you're stuck between two universes, well, eventually you should be able to find the edge of one of those universes, right? So I think that's where that's what he's trying to do here. I think he's trying to walk far enough away from the red light that he hopefully finds the edge of this particular reality.
I hope we're still friends when I come back. I'm going now. I'll see you soon. The control panel didn't record anything for nearly 4 full months, when suddenly Robert returned, far less hopeful than when he left. He says that this place is hell, and it goes on forever. He traveled in a single direction for 2 months before turning around. He then wonders if he let himself fall down long enough, would he eventually hit a bottom? More than 4 months go by before Robert returns again, saying there is no bottom either. This is the point where Robert's mental state really begins to deteriorate, as he asks Red if he's ever been married, or had kids, begging Red to talk to him. He suddenly realizes that his picture of Anna is fading due to the Hume levels, and he panics, begging Anna not to go, and asking Red to go get help. Robert loses coherency at this point, as months go by with him only sobbing, screaming, and mumbling. It has now been roughly 2 years and 9 months since Robert entered SCP-3001. Robert finally manages to return and make another recording, although his voice is now distorted due to both his own and the control panel's Hume levels dropping.
Okay.
He says that he can't feel his legs anymore, and he's not even sure if he's real anymore, but he knows he doesn't want to die yet. He says he went in a straight diagonal line for 6 months, and fell down for 8 months, but still found no end. He tells Red that he and Anna were planning to name their kid Lucy. His hand begins to break apart, resembling a spider web, but he still retains his knowledge of science, continuing to do calculations on 3001. Unfortunately, his body is beginning to seriously disintegrate, as he claims his hands are moving through each other, and he pulls his thumb off. He says he can go through himself, feeling both warm and cold, and also loses a kidney, but pleads to let him keep just his heart. 5 years have passed now.
5 years in complete and total nothingness while you slowly dissolve like a sugar cube in water. Oh man.
With Robert and the control panel still somehow held together, but finally the red light begins to fade. 9 months go by, and Red seems to make a return. Robert attempted to kill himself over 220 times, but none of them worked. He can't see his body due to the darkness, but speculates that he at least has 1 foot left, a few leg muscles, maybe a lung, and a heart. He claims that this non-dimension is now getting smaller, as there now seems to be a visible border that is getting brighter. The light from this border allows Robert to see himself, and he says there's so much gone, although the control panel seems to be far more solid than him. Robert claims that touching the panel hurts like hell, but he's surprisingly lucid now. He comes to a realization about the collapsing border, which is acting more like waves, and also begins to understand what we already know about 3001 being a non-dimension between 2 realities, saying that it's a dead end. Robert says that these waves are from a parallel reality, and they're pushing on him and Red, gradually creating a new wormhole. The only problem is, he's not sure what will happen when that wormhole is created. Robert's body continues to break down as blood leaks from him, and he finds himself constantly vomiting, despite not having eaten anything for years, nor having a stomach to hold anything. He says that he's not ready to go back yet, as he's pretty much a floating pile of organs kept functional by 3001. He has to stay away from the waves to prevent him from going through a wormhole and dying, but unfortunately the control panel will eventually go through. Robert says that he has 5 more years in 3001, during which he will slowly restabilize, giving him 5 years to figure out how to get out, but he'll have to stay in here without his metal companion. A humming pulse begins growing louder in the background, and Robert breaks down in hysterics again, becoming almost incomprehensible as he begs both Red and Anna for support, wanting to hold her hand and telling her he lost his ring. 5 years, 11 months, and 21 days after an incident sent Dr. Robert Scranton into a non-dimension, the stabilizer control panel, thought lost, suddenly reappeared in the testing facility. Dr. Anna Lang, overseeing the testing, went to investigate the panel, horrified at finding it covered in blood, bile, viscera, and hair, identifying the hair color as belonging to Robert. A hand fell off of the panel, along with a wedding ring, and Anna accessed the first audio log, hearing her husband's voice for the first time in nearly 6 years. She proceeds to faint from shock.
So what I'm getting so far is he was working on this machine to help control the Hume levels of things and therefore stabilize unstable reality. In the process of doing so, he accidentally created an unstable wormhole which pulled him into a non-dimension of nothingness. And then he's there for, I guess, a little over 5 years, where he slowly dissolves into nothingness, and then as the nothingness starts to collapse, it creates another wormhole which sends the device back into the real dimension, covered in what is left of Robert. Okay. All right. So I'm assuming that everything he was able to record on that machine is how the Foundation knows what happened to him, knows of the existence of this non-universe, this non-reality. Okay, all right. Let's see how they wrap this up. I was kind of assuming that Scranton survived this experiment, but it doesn't appear that way.
This is where the story of SCP-3001 leaves off, ultimately unfinished and leaving Robert's final fate to your imagination. According to the author, although much of Robert went back to our reality along with the control panel, there is still some of him in 3001, and it's quite possible he's still functional. Will he find a way to eventually return to reality and reunite with his wife? Or will he slowly go completely insane and disintegrate entirely? Those aren't the only options, as some tales have shown, but I think it's good a story like this is left so open to the reader. The concept of being isolated from all human contact is certainly not a new one in fiction, but it's rarely taken to this degree. Not only was Robert left stranded with only a machine to talk to, he was left in near total darkness and had no way of ending his life. Chances are we've all felt emotions of loneliness and isolation at one point or another. But at least we're not stuck in the Red Reality.
Quiet sobbing. Not yet, Red. Please. I know you want to go. I'm not ready yet. I'm not. I'm not. Splattering noise heard. I love you, Red. I love you, Anna. Quiet sob. Uh, nah. Dr. Scranton's speech pattern is almost regular. Loud metallic bang heard, followed by splattering noise as something strikes the control panel once again. 5 years, 11 months, 21 days. All right, guys, that was SCP-3001 Red Reality. So, that explains, for the most part, who Robert Scranton is and what happened to him. It was an interesting SCP, how it kind of functions, how it keeps him alive, because of his Hume level was so different than the Hume level of the reality that he was currently existing in. It allowed him to stay stable for years. However, as his Hume level dropped to match the surrounding area of the dimension that he was in, it essentially was like dropping a salt cube or a sugar cube into a glass of water and just watching it dissolve. It can hold its shape and consistency for a little while, but eventually, once it dissolves and becomes homogeneous with the rest of the mixture, there becomes no separation between what is him and what is the dimension he's in. And if that dimension is nothing, then it also means he becomes nothing. So it's a pretty interesting idea. It's a pretty interesting concept of this place. The only thing I wish I would have learned more about in this video is the actual device, the Scranton Reality Anchor. It still hasn't really explained that much about the device itself. This seems to be more about the story of him and what happened to him. So, and it also did leave it up to a little bit of interpretation at the end. But for the most part, I think he's dead, because unless he's able to completely reform his body, like Dr. Manhattan, and come back to our reality, I'm actually getting very strong Dr. Manhattan vibes from this. You know, with Dr. Manhattan, you know, he was working on a machine and it was activated, and the machine basically disassembled him. You know, it did the job of dissolving him, much like this reality of nothingness does to you. It dissolves you, it pulls you apart at the very most fundamental levels. So unless Robert Scranton can pull off a Dr. Manhattan and somehow recoalesce his body, I just don't see him coming back successfully. If he, like, you know, unless, like I said, unless he's putting his body back together, if he comes through the wormhole, he's just gonna fall apart into a pile of organs. On the flip side of that, maybe he will pull a Dr. Manhattan. Maybe he will literally pull himself together, stabilize a wormhole, return to our reality with an understanding of the mechanics of the universe on such a level that he might himself become a reality warper. I kind of like that idea. I kind of like the idea of Robert Scranton pulling a Dr. Manhattan, reforming himself, and having mastery over reality. You know, that's Scranton's whole thing with his reality anchor, is trying to control and stabilize reality. This could be, Scranton himself could be the ultimate reality anchor. But anyways, guys, I did really enjoy this one. If there's a separate video specifically on the reality anchor, I would love to see that one. So let me know down below in the comments if there is something like that. If not, leave a like, leave a subscribe, leave a comment down below. Let me know what other SCPs we should be checking out. And as always, guys, take care of yourselves and have a great day.